Welcome to the Bold Lounge podcast. My name is Lee Burgess, and I will be your host. If you're anything like me, you love hearing inspiring stories of people who have gone on bold journeys and made a positive impact in the world. This podcast is all about those kinds of stories. Every week, we'll hear from someone who has taken a leap or embarked on an extraordinary journey. In addition to hearing their stories, we'll also learn about their bold growth mindset that they use to make things happen. Whether they faced challenges or doubts along the way, they persisted and ultimately achieved their goals. These impactful stories will leave you feeling motivated and inspired to pursue your own bold journey. I believe everyone has a bold story waiting to be free. Tune in and get ready to be inspired. Welcome to the Bold Lounge. Today I have Ryan Hawk. He is the podcast host for The Learning Leader, which has been around for 8 years, over 500 episodes. So definitely someone you want to listen to in their podcast. He's also the author of Welcome to Management and The Pursuit of Excellence. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks so much for having me, Lee. It's good to be with you.
So we're going to jump right in and get bold. So I think the question that I asked to start off each podcast is, what is your definition of bold? So what does it look like to Ryan Hawk to be bold?
I think having the courage to stand up for what you believe in, the willingness to be both thoughtful and then intentional with your actions. I think of being bold as someone who has built confidence by providing evidence to themselves that they can do hard things and then leaning on that to make the next bold decision and to continue on.
Okay. What's the first time you remember being bold based on your definition?
I try to do that every day. But the first time, I was 14 years old. I was starting quarterback for our varsity team at Centerville High School as a freshman. And in between my freshman and sophomore year, my head coach, Bob Gregg, and offensive coordinator, Ron Ullery, came to me, sat me down, and said, you need to start using your voice. You need to start showing your confidence and leading more than just with your actions as the quarterback of the team, regardless of how old or young you are. Find your voice. They want to follow you. Give them somebody to follow. It's not enough anymore just to execute the offense and run the plays. Now you have to be the person in control on the field for all of your teammates. And so I think that was a seminal moment for me when they told me that what you're doing is great, but it's not enough. And I think that's the case for a lot of leaders, is as you kind of grow into that role, you have to keep doing more and keep doing more and keep doing more. And that's why being a leader is not for everyone, and it's not always fun, but it is, I think, an awesome responsibility that I personally love.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of gets at one of the things in your book, which is compliance versus commitment, right? So everyone knew the plays on the team. Everyone knew what they needed to do to execute. Here's my role. Here's your role. But it really was the emotional commitment to you as the leader, right? In a way, as the quarterback. And I think as a leader, the analogy would be you're the quarterback of your team. And then as you set out, do you think people set out to be leaders, or do you think it's something that's inside them, that's driving them, that pushes them? I remember not high school, but second grade, I played soccer. This is before you had to have girls and boys sports, so that's how old I am. But, so I played on a boys league, but I didn't realize I was supposed to do anything other than different than play really hard. And I remember being told, you really need to be careful. You need to listen to your mom and be more careful on the field. And I was getting jacked up and laid out. And I loved it, and I didn't know any different. In a way, I felt like, I guess I was leading on the field. And, there were maybe 4 girls in the entire league. And that just for me was a moment I remember about kind of being bold and stepping out and doing something different, but really not realizing it was even bold, right? Going back to my question is do people choose to be leaders or grow into leadership, or what is your thought about, is it nature or nurture in the sense of leadership?
It's probably a mix of both. Okay. But the key word that you did say there, though, that I think has to be a part of everyone who is a leader is that it's a choice. So regardless of what you're born with or how you're wired, you still have to consciously make that choice every day to lead. I think that's one of the few things all leaders have in common, is that they have made the choice to step up to say, I want this responsibility. I want to be held responsible for what happens with my team or for what happens with this particular project. I want that. I'll raise my hand for that, and I'll raise my hand for that every single day. So I think that's the key differentiator, is that in order, I think, to be an effective leader, you have to consciously make that choice on a regular basis.
And I think it can be imperfect. I mean, in the sense
Yeah.
of being a leader is not about being perfect. Like, it's about trying and probably failing, maybe even more than you succeed every now and then. I think that's one of the things that I always tried to support in my teams was like permission to like try and fail and try and fail and learn. I mean, obviously not just fail, 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 but we're going to learn, right?
Yeah.
And I think in that process, like one of the things in your framework is lead yourself. And I think as you think about leading yourself, one of the things you have to realize too is that it's not always going to maybe go as planned. And when you think about leading yourself too forward in with your team and using the framework, what are the other things that people need to understand about what it takes to lead yourself? Because I think this might be something that, like you said, people get the technical aspects. They have the books, they have Harvard Business Review, they go to all the right conferences, they have the right network, they have gazillion LinkedIn followers or whatever they're using as their measure of success. But if they're not leading themselves first, I feel like they probably can never be as successful as they potentially could.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with you.
Yeah.
I have yet to find, and I've interviewed 520 plus, and I've played for a number of amazing people and had teachers, mentors, coaches, whatever. I've yet to find someone who effectively leads others without first effectively leading themselves. What does that look like? They have their own, I think, a great foundation, most high character, a set of core values, critical behaviors that are aligned with those core values. They live them out each day. They're thoughtful and intentional. They're reflective. They are learning leaders. That's why I called my podcast that, meaning they're constantly working on bettering themselves, regardless of what they've accomplished or the praise that others shower on them or criticism. They know that each day they're waking up with the intention to be a little bit better, to be a little bit wiser when they go to sleep than they were when they woke up that day. And I think this ability to incrementally get better, not a lot, just a little bit each day, that is powerful. It compounds over time. Just like compound interest with your money, you can compound yourself by consistently and constantly working on becoming better. So what are you doing? What do you have in place to ensure you go to bed a little bit wiser than when you woke up? I realized I probably wasn't intentional enough about this years ago, and I was talking to so many people on podcasts that I got to put some sort of system in place. And so a quick 4-part thing that I think about when it comes to leading myself and becoming a learning machine, as Charlie Munger once famously said, is what am I doing each day to ensure I'm going to bed wiser than when I woke up? And so for the 4 parts, I'll try to go through it quickly. First, I need to fuel my intake engine. I need to be speaking with people who are far wiser than me. I need to be reading books. I need to be listening to podcasts, right? Fuel the intake engine, indulge that curiosity. Second, I can't just be a learner. I need to be a doer. I need to be somebody who is regularly experimenting with what I learned. I'm not just about having the conversations and taking the notes and reading the books. I then need to take that and put it into play. Take action, experiment, right? Modulate. Figure out what I need to do in order to take that learning and put in action. Third, I need to take a step back. I need to reflect. I need to think. I need to say, what worked of that experiment? What didn't? What should I keep doing? What should I stop doing? That's the third step. And then the fourth step, and I found to really cement my learning, I need to teach it to somebody else. So part of the reason why I get up on stage and give speeches and why I write books and why I meet with people one-on-one is for that fourth part, is to really cement what I've gathered, what I've learned to better myself. And by teaching others, whether in the form of writing a book or standing on a stage in front of a lot of people, I have to do a lot of work to prepare for those moments. And through the course of that preparation is where a lot of that learning really sinks in. And I can internalize it, and I don't really even have to think about it. It just kind of subconsciously comes out when I'm writing or speaking. And so to me, if I spend each day that I fuel my intake engine, that I run experiments, that I reflect on what I've learned based on those experiments, and that I teach to somebody else, that's a good day. That means I've probably done a good job. I'm probably going to bed wiser than when I woke up. And so that's how I try to kind of test myself. Am I leading myself first before I can lead anybody else? And that's one good prompt for me.
Yeah. One of the things I talk about a lot is the combination of mindset, strategy, and wellness, meaning taking care of yourself, your self-care, your health and wellness, your mental health. Strategy, that for me is kind of the lifeblood of a leader, is like, how do I learn? How do I apply? How do I teach others, kind of using your words there. And then the other side is the mindset and kind of living in the growth mindset world more than the fixed mindset. So when I think of a leader, it's kind of like that Venn of those three areas. And a lot of what you just talked about kind of connects with that. When you think about mindset of a learning leader, what is unique about them versus a non-learning leader? Is there such a thing?
So I've worked, thankfully not for a lot of them, but I've worked for a few bosses who were not learning leaders. Those bosses, I'd say some of the similarities among them are they've got it all figured out. They've got all the answers. They don't read books. They don't need to meet with mentors. They've already learned everything, right? They already know it all. They've got it. They've got everything. Versus, the know-it-all types, which unfortunately, if you've been around corporate America, you've probably worked for one or two, or hopefully not too many.
Yeah.
Versus the learn-it-all managers or leaders who, again, regardless of what they've accomplished, that their really only goal is a process-oriented goal, and that is to be better the next day than they were today, is to be better, like I said, this evening than you were this morning. It's a mindset so much so that you don't even really have to think of it anymore. It's just the way you are. It becomes your default setting. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the place where we want to get. That's what a learning leader is all about. It doesn't matter what you accomplish. It doesn't matter what you do as far as your mindset. It's all about, no matter what happens, I'm surrendering that outcome and I'm focused on the process of working to get better and better each day. And by doing that, the results, it's funny how it works. The results, you start ending up in your favor, whether that's winning games or that's amazing opportunities that are presented to you, that are business inquiries, whatever it may be. I've found over the past 8 years of doing this show that when I consciously work hard at that, these cool opportunities seem to arise that now has become my life's work, my business. So that's really, I think, what I would say the difference between a learning leader and a non-learning leader would be.
Yeah, so I think in the sense of we've probably experienced them along our career in some form or fashion. Certainly my listeners, as we've talked about, a lot of them are making pivots right now or transitioning. Some of them chosen pivots, some of them not so much chosen. And so in the world we're in now, I think one of the things that gets talked a lot about is personal branding and branding yourself. And what I see sometimes is like people not being real in their branding. I think one of the things to be a leader is you do have to be vulnerable and you do have to show your imperfections, and you have to be able to know that everything that you're showing others, they're reflecting it back to you. So if you always have this perfectionist or where you're always doing well or everything's always rainbows and butterflies, it's hard for people to actually get to know you. Mm-hmm. So when you think of a learning leader, what do you think one of the key things that you try to emulate or try to show when it comes to vulnerability? How important is that? And showing the real person when you're thinking about your brand or who you are.
Well, the good thing about having a podcast, which is that it's really hard to fake this if you're going to do it for a really long time. Mm-hmm. I think in this parasocial relationship of listeners and the podcast host, I think when I meet people who have listened for years, it is obvious that they genuinely know me. They really do. Now, I don't know them as well. I love getting to know them, but they have a genuine sense of who I am because they've listened for a long time. And to me, the old adage is it plays here, which is the benefits of not lying is that you don't have to ever remember anything. You just say what happened, right? Mm-hmm. If you lie, you got to remember what the lie is and then try to remember the lie and then keep telling it. Well, the same is true if you show up as a lie or inauthentic, then you have to almost always be playing a character. And people can sense when you're playing a character. People can sense when there's some facade, when it's not real, it's not genuine. And so to me, it's just, I think that would be exhausting. I don't think it would be very fun. And so from the beginning, even though some of those early episodes are not good, I have tried to follow my genuine curiosity with great rigor, as Brian Koppelman told me. And if people like it, that's great. And if they don't, that's a bummer, but I'm going to keep going. And
Yeah.
so I think really that's what it's about. It's like not living a lie and knowing, and Seth Godin said this to me multiple times. I've had him on the show. It's not for everybody, and that's okay. That's okay. But I think it would be much worse if you create this character in order to attract a certain type of person, and then you realize, oh my God, like that's not me, and I probably haven't even attracted the type of person I want to attract. Like, so it's,
Right.
I'd rather attract people who are just kind of curious about the things I'm curious about, and they have questions about it, and we want to talk through those things. But if it was a character or a performance as opposed to just showing up genuinely as yourself, that would be exhausting. I don't think it'd be very fun, and I definitely don't think it would be sustainable long term. And for me, my favorite thing to do is to do what we're doing right now, have a deep, long form conversation with one person at a time. And so the reward for me is that I get to keep doing it. Well, if I don't do it well, or if I'm not genuine, I won't get to keep doing it. So to me, it's all about like the reward for that is that I get the opportunity to keep doing it. And so in order to do that, I think I do have to be genuine, real, authentic to make it maybe attractive to the type of people that I want to be around.
Yeah, because I think people know when it's not.
Right.
And I think what's interesting is like I see so many people trying to be something that they're not, and who they are is great, but they don't think it's good enough, or they don't think it's polished enough, or they've changed their real picture to an AI picture or whatever, which, maybe
Some of those look cool. Some of them look cool.
Actually, yeah, they do. But
sometimes you do it for fun.
Yeah. Oh, I've done it for, hey, I'm honest. I've definitely tried it out, but I'm like, man, my teeth are really nicer in real life than they are in that AI.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
really need to work on the teeth. But I think in general, like, I think sometimes we don't actually think we're good enough. And even, and maybe that's part of being a leader too. Like you just don't think you're good enough. So you keep striving, but it's not about being good enough. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a personal thing. Like maybe I'm not good enough is more of like, I need to work through some things to understand that I am, and what I'm doing is different and inspiring, and being me actually is one of the most authentic things I can do to be a leader.
Yeah.
That's where I wish people would hear that more. And I mean, of all the people that you've interviewed, and you've interviewed 520 plus, and probably even more so in your work that you do and you speak and talk to others and work with companies, like what are the pieces, or can you think of like a few people you would say like that is one of the most authentic leaders I've ever met?
Well, it's funny that you're asking this now. I just released an episode with a guy named Kevin Kelly. Some call him the most interesting man in the world. He's written a lot of great books and blog posts, things I've read. He started Wired magazine many years ago. But anyway, in that conversation with him, I talked about a young woman named Maggie Rogers. And I believe at the time of the video that I had seen, Maggie was 21, 22 years old. She went to college to study music and to produce and make music. And one day there's a special guest. That special guest is Pharrell. And Pharrell is coming in to kind of listen to some of the music they've made, give them some feedback, and just talk to them. I think they called it a masterclass with Pharrell. Anyways, Pharrell's sitting there in this video, and Maggie Rogers is here, and the teacher is over here. And he's like, all right, well, let's play it up. Let's listen to it, Maggie. Let's go. And she presses play, and this beautiful, you may have seen the video, but if not, I'll send it to you. It's awesome. But this beautiful
that'd be great.
Song pops up, unlike anything I'd ever heard before. And they go through it, and you look, and the video is just so cool because you see Pharrell's eyes. He's just like, what? Oh my God. And she's still nervous. She's looking at his shoes. I saw her in an interview afterwards. She's like, I was so nervous I just looked at his shoes, but he's looking at her like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And the song ends, and the other students clap, and he looks at her and he goes, wow, I have absolutely no notes for you. You want to know why? Because I've never heard anything like that before. And that's you. That's authentically you. It's like the Wu-Tang Clan. You may not like it, but you've never heard anything like it. And and Kevin Kelly, the reason I brought that story up with him is because he said, don't try to be the best, try to be the only. And I think that's hard, but in that case, Maggie Rogers was the only. She was, I hadn't heard anything like that. And on top of that, she's sitting next to one of her musical heroes, and she had the guts to press play. And I think that's an inspiring thing to think about in our own lives, is when do we have the guts not only to try to be the only, but also to press play. especially if we create art. And I do have a wide view of art, not only music, not only paintings and drawings, but also books and words. I think that can be forms, an art form. So that's to me like the ultimate form of being the only, having guts, and of being an original. Because there's a lot of bands who probably try to sound like the Beatles or name what other famous band, but most of the ones who really break through, you probably haven't heard anything like that before.
Yeah.
And I think
Nirvana just came to mind for me. Like
yeah,
when you said that, I'm like, they're the only,
loved them. Loved them.
Yeah.
That unplugged concert, that I remember that unplugged concert very well on MTV. That's still making the rounds online, and it was just like I haven't heard anything like this before, and just it's so original and so cool. And I think we can draw from stories like that, from that art, for our own lives to say, well, what do I uniquely bring to the table? And I don't think like it's just going to come pouring out easily. It takes work. It takes effort. It takes being really thoughtful about it. But it is pretty cool when it does come out, when you do see it. And it's something that I try to work on all the time, because it's hard. It's much easier just to kind of semi-copy and add on to what somebody else has already done versus being the only in your category.
Yeah, and being the original. I think the other thing it takes is time.
Yeah.
And people are very impatient. And I mean, that's not my middle name, Patience, but I realize, I think, especially since I started my own company and I started doing things, that it takes time. And with that, you have to be patient. You have to be genuine. You have to go through the pieces. This overnight success and, making millions and millions of dollars, like that's honestly not what it's all about for me. Like I have two things written on a chart in my office. It's create and joy. I just want to always be creating, and I want to be happy. Yeah. And a little ROI in there is great, but I think, from the particulars of like that should be leading what I do. I want to be creative. I want to be learning. I want to be connecting, and then I want to be happy. And I think a lot of my career I was creating, but I'm not sure I was happy, right? Like it was good, but was it really that good? Like, was I happy for a little bit and then kind of up and down? And so for me, like, it just takes some time, especially when you're starting off. But as I work with people and work with my clients, like one of the things I try to do things very quickly, like one of the things that I work on is agility and decision making and course correcting daily versus every 6 months or 3 months. And so I think there's agility of a leader too. But when it comes to time, what do you see with regard to how leaders manage time and expectation of success?
I see a wide variety of this. I think this is actually one of the areas that a lot of them really struggle with. So some of the people I work with in my learning leader circles and one-on-one clients that have big jobs, senior level jobs in corporate America, and one of the natural exercises that probably everybody does who works with some sort of advisor or coach is you pull up your calendar, you review it for the past 2 weeks, you look at what's happening in the upcoming 2 weeks, right? We just talk about like, okay, what are we doing each day? And it is quite common to see a lot of back-to-back type days, which to me feels like a nightmare, but I get it. I was VP of sales for a $500 million business. I had a calendar like that one day. It was not very fun. Those days were not long for me, right? Did it for exactly 1 year. Anyway, I think how we could improve is to strip those calendars to nothing and only add back the essential. By the way, much easier said than done. I say this, I've gone through this exercise multiple times. A lot of times we still struggle even after going through, oh no, that's essential. When that usually stems from a lack of trust and delegation and having your leaders make decisions without you. That's just one symptom of maybe a greater problem. But yeah, I think time management is a big issue that continues to be here. I think there is kind of a weird paradox where people claim they don't want to be that busy, but they also like to be busy. And some of them have it like hold it up as a badge, like I'm just so busy. Oh my God, I'm just so busy. But some of them actually get less busy and then they almost get more on edge. They're like, wait a second, am I not doing enough? And so it especially with like high performers, I found that it's hard to get to the place where you can clear out and have more time to be reflective and more thoughtful and more strategic, which all leaders need to be. But it takes time, it takes work to get over that fact that no, you don't have to have a meeting all the time with random people with an organization. We got to get past that, but that is certainly a a process that is not an easy one.
Yeah. One of the things you talk about in your first book is really around purpose, focus, and discipline. And I think when it comes to your calendar, like you really need to kind of funnel it through those three words. Purpose, what is the purpose of the meeting? What is the focus of the meeting? And do I have the discipline to not have it or have it? And if I'm in the meeting, how do I make sure we actually stick to what we want to accomplish in this time together? I think that's
Yeah.
the one thing I see as I work with people, primarily in a one-to-one way, is they say they don't have time for strategy. And then I ask the first questions like, well, how are you spending your time? Kind of going to your example of, oh, I'm in back-to-back meetings, but, are you setting them? Is your supervisor setting? Because it is hard to decline your supervisor.
Yeah.
So I think, from that perspective, like are you focused on strategy? Are you focused on being busy? And I love what you talked about there, like trust or delegation. And it's not only trust maybe of your staff, maybe you trust your staff, but maybe your leader doesn't trust you, or, like trust could like go in different directions. And the delegation factor, like, are you just holding on to stuff that you shouldn't because you want it to be perfect or you want it to be, polished, but people don't learn if they don't figure out how to do the work. So I think those are things for people to hear too. But I think one of the things people do is they have the meetings because it's what they've always done or how the organization runs. And, I was a big believer of, quarterly looking at what you've spent your time on and going, whoa, like I've spent way too much time in meetings. So I'm going to clear all my one-to-ones. I'm going to clear it. And like you said, you go to like put well, that's important. Well, that's important. I remember my assistant going, well, now you put half of them back on, and it's like, okay. That didn't go as I thought. So I think that's just maybe a challenge for people to really think about purposeful use of their time. And when they say they don't have time for strategy, to really think why they don't, because they're probably not prioritizing it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And to hit back about meetings, not a big fan of reoccurring meetings because sometimes you just go to them because they're reoccurring without like enough intention of what the purpose is. It's like, well, it was on both of our calendars or on all of our calendars as a reoccurring meeting. As a manager in corporate America, that was one of the things that I just didn't have. I stopped having reoccurring meetings. If I was going to have a meeting with my team, like let's say Monday to kick off the week, then I would send them a meeting notice with the proper amount of time, with a detailed agenda of why we're having the meeting, and keeping the number of people in the meeting as few as possible, just the people who have to be there. Yeah. I think that's the other thing is like we started adding, like we have meeting bloat. We start just adding a bunch of, oh yeah, they should be there. Yeah, they need to be aware of this. Let's just have them come sit in, and let's have them sit in. And so before you know it, there are like 20 people in there and really only need a meeting for 6 or something. And I think that happens, and that's how you get caught up and you feel like, oh, I guess I got to go because they invited me. So I did like years ago when Elon Musk said, like, if you don't need to be here, you just leave, just go. Like, that's part of how we're going to do it. And you shouldn't be invited, and don't invite people that don't need to be there. Like, I think that's a smart thing to try to have fewer meetings, but just have a purpose behind all of them, and don't have reoccurring ones unless you have a distinct purpose and reason for doing it, and an outcome you're trying to get from each of those. That seems to help. But we could talk about meetings forever because it's an ongoing thing that seems like will never fully be solved, but will also always be a part of a leader's life.
Yeah, it's really about how you use your time. And I think one of the things that I said was kind of looking back and doing that audit, or looking forward and looking the audit. I think just really thinking purposely about it is important. So I want to end with one of the most recent episodes. You were talking about if you had a party and your family couldn't come, who would you invite? And I wanted to talk a little bit about who you selected, if you're okay with that. Particularly, why would you select that person to be at your party? And each of them is a leader in their own right. Okay, so you had mentioned that you would have The Rock, Dave Chappelle, Dave Matthews, Peyton Manning, and Taylor.
Oh, these are like dream guests. Yeah.
Yeah, your dream guest. But it was to a birthday party was your example. So in each one of those, why would you want them either as a guest at your party, or, maybe I don't think The Rock's been on your podcast yet, has he? Mm-mm. Okay, let's just start with him. Like, why would you, or what do you see in him as a leader? Why would you want him at your party?
I think he's a really interesting guy. I think I had Jason Pfeiffer on, who got to know him really well, who runs Entrepreneur Magazine, and said he was genuine and very kind and very thoughtful and very grateful for his life. Mm-hmm. So not only is he this big, strong, charismatic, confident guy, but he's also humble and kind and curious and thoughtful and caring for other people. I think that's an awesome combination.
Yeah.
And he just leads a really interesting life. I would bet he has a lot of amazing stories that I would try to draw out of him if I was talking to him. So he's kind of got the combination of it all. I would think the commonality of all the people I mentioned was not only are they leading a very interesting life, but from what I hear of the people that do know them and from what you see, they seem to be humble and kind and curious and thoughtful people too.
Yeah. And each one of them worked really hard.
Yes.
It wasn't like, Peyton Manning just stepped on the football field and was the best.
Right.
And when you think about, he's the only actually. Each one of these probably isn't only.
Yeah.
They're not just the best in their field, like they're the only. And they worked really hard. When you think of leadership too, like it is not an easy path sometimes, right? So
Right.
each one of these people, I think, in addition to the things that you said about them, I think they also worked really hard.
Yes.
For Dave Matthews, I'm just curious because I'm a Dave Matthews fan myself. So wondered kind of what did you see in him as a leader?
So I've been going to Dave shows since middle school, high school. So we've probably seen him like 80 times. Just my favorite musician in the world. I've been lucky to meet him before. It's been a few years.
Nice.
Again, courage to stand up for what he believes in, knowing that he at times is going to maybe alienate fans.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily even agree with everything he says, but I love the fact that he has the courage and guts to do that. I think it's a great quality in all people. Again, I've been lucky to get to know people who work with him and know him well, and everything I hear is again very curious, very thoughtful, very loving, very caring. And when he gets on stage, I mean, I absolutely love every second of those shows. I watch a ton of their stuff online. I listen to a ton of it. And like I said, I've been to maybe 80 plus shows. There were some years where we would go to upwards of 8, 9, 10 Dave shows a year.
Nice.
I don't go to quite as many as anymore, but I'll go to at least 1 or 2 a year, maybe more than that, depending on the year and the locations. This year, I think I'm going to go to 2 or 3.
Have you been to the Gorge? Have you ever done the Gorge?
I haven't.
Okay.
I would love to do that. It's never the best time of the year because it's right around when
It's always a fall.
school and stuff going on with our kids. So my wife is not as big a fan. She goes to be nice to me and would not like to see them multiple days in a row. I could see them.
Yeah, that's a commitment.
I could see them like I wanted to go to the Mexico Dave and Tim shows the past couple of years. I'm like, let's go.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go by myself. I
That's
would,
no
but I'd rather go with her. And I know though she wouldn't like that. She'd be like, let's just go to the concert one of the nights. I'm like, well, I kind of want to go every night.
Yeah.
So anyway, on top of him being just an amazing guy, and the management company he works with, a guy who works there was in one of my leadership circles, and so we talk all the time about him. And I'm like, what's he actually like? What's he like? And he's like, oh my God, he's even better than you would imagine. He's even better. So that type of thing is why I would put a guy like Dave on the list too.
Yeah. And so I'll end with someone who I actually just watched her documentary, so Taylor Swift. And one of the things that I knew people were hard on her and judgmental, but I didn't realize how rude and awful and hateful some people were, right? So I don't know if you've seen her documentary, but it was when, people were saying she was above herself. And it was actually when she stood up for something. And it was around the election time. And I'm not going to get political, but she stood up for something, and it had a positive and it had a negative reaction. And from there, I think people also took it to another degree. But this is someone who is a human being who, has feelings, who has a family. And I think just the way that she handled it, at least what was represented in the documentary, I was just surprised at that. And to me, that's also a sign of a leader.
Big time.
Of standing up for something, knowing that you could take a hit. And Dave's done this, and probably The Rock's. I mean, probably every one of the people on your list, and a lot of your leaders on your show. But when it comes to leadership and the criticism, is there anything particular about Taylor or any of your other leaders that we can learn from, in the sense of realizing that be a leader may also come with criticism and negativity, but it's standing in that space that I think is bold, or a bold part of being a leader?
Yeah, I watched that on spring break with my daughter Ella. We stayed up and watched that that was probably the third or fourth time we watched the same documentary.
Yeah.
And I know she was very nervous when she posted that. I remember that scene very well. I give huge credit because it would be much, much easier not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think values are, though. Values are doing it when it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor can say, like, I stand up for women's rights. That's one thing to say it. It's another thing to potentially alienate a lot of fans by making that post when she did to stand up for, she supported one person running for office versus another one.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, potentially she was worried that it could potentially hurt her career. I think it helped her career. I mean, she's bigger than ever. We're going to her show coming up.
You got tickets. Good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I can't wait. I've seen a lot of clips. But I think that is an absolute form of leadership, is to stand up for what you believe in, because at your core, like you watched during those meetings, her dad, all of her business managers are like, what are you doing? It's not worth it. The Dixie Chicks got ruined by doing whatever. Don't become them.
Yeah.
And she goes, no. And she's kind of getting emotional and saying, you don't understand. And then she lists out her values about being a leader and about being a woman and all. I thought, oh my God, like this is awesome. I became a huge fan. Now, on top of that, I also think she is wildly talented and writes her own music and sits in there and collaborates with people, and they come up with, I'm just like, I am blown away by artists who are able to create from nothing or draw from their own life experiences and make art that makes other people feel great. And yeah, I mean, I can't wait for that dad-daughter moment to go to the show. It didn't matter what it cost. Like, I was going to go. Yeah. And we're going. And I think that's what life's really all about, is creating amazing experiences with people you love. And that's partially why we work so hard, is to try our best to create these magical experiences with the people we love the most. And to me, it's like turning hard work into loving, memorable, awesome experiences. Like, that's the whole point. Like, what are we doing here if we're not trying to do that? So like, that's how I kind of think about both her, Taylor Swift, as well as the experiences that she's creating for so many people, pretty much like at all of her shows.
Yeah. That's an interesting fact. Like, leadership actually is creating an experience.
Yeah.
Whether it's for your team or for your fans or, for yourself, honestly, like, that's what it's about. That's what working hard is about, is to create that experience that inspires others, that helps others feel that they're not alone, or helps people know that they can make it too. I think that's one thing that we don't realize and probably value enough in one another, is like, there's something to learn from everyone. Maybe you learn what not to do. Maybe you learn what to do. Like, I had early loss in my life. I lost my brother when I was 6 and he was 11. And like, that kind of definitely put me on a path of like YOLO big time. And like, knowing that it doesn't matter how old you are. Like, people think, I'm going to just kind of live through this and retire in 10 years, or gonna to me, I just mean, like, you got to live life now, live it, have that experience. And I think that's what good leaders do too. They create that experience. And I think I've never thought about it that way till you just said it. But I think it's something that you create for others as well as yourself.
Yeah. Bill Perkins has this term called memory dividends. I had him on the show. His book's called Die with Zero. And I think a lot about creating those memory dividends, which essentially are like, again, turning your hard work, which hopefully creates financial resources, into amazing experiences with people you love, which then you'll have those memory dividends for the rest of your life. You have like nostalgia for some of the best moments of your life, of having a default setting as, I want to create more nostalgic moments that I'll look back on fondly. And to me, I'm just constantly thinking about that, whatever it may be. I want to say, like, how am I actively working to create nostalgic moments? Like, one of the examples of this for me is I also have a daughter, Charlie, who's 8 years old. And one of our favorite things in the world to do is for me to hold her and throw her in the pool. She loves it. It's just the ultimate joy, right? We have pictures and videos, and it's just the best. I love it so, so much. And before last summer, though, I was thinking, like, what can I do to ensure I create as many of those memory dividends as possible? That's something that's virtually free, right? We just have a membership to the pool. And to me, it was just like, do whatever it takes when it's cold. I live in Ohio. Do whatever it takes when it's cold outside so that when it's warm, I'm going to get out of my studio around 3:30ish and we're going to go to the pool as many days as possible. And I'm going to do the same thing this summer. And I've been working on my schedule so that I can do that again this summer. And it's just, I think it's about being intentional around creating those memory dividends for yourself and being very clear on how you can do it, whatever they may be for you. It's different for everybody. The point is to figure out what that is for you and then try to engineer your life, your work to do that. And so that's what I try to do. It's not necessarily the case for everybody is able to based on their job. I do get the privilege in that, but I think it's at least worth the discussion and it's worth the thoughts of how you can do that for yourself and try to, because I don't see any way I will ever regret any of those days leaving early to go throw her in the pool. Never.
Yeah.
Now, I also know she's growing fast. So I don't know when she's going to be too big. Either she doesn't want me to or she's literally too long for me to do that anymore. And so there's a finality to it. Like I realize those days are coming fast. And to me, it's like, let's just make the most of it. So whatever that thing is for anybody, it's as you said, YOLO, whatever it may be, it's like make the most of that like right now and be intentional about how you can figure that out and create that for yourself right now.
Yeah. So that's a great way for us as we kind of end out the podcast of one of the things you talk about is meeting the moment. So in my mind, like that is meeting the moment, like understanding that this is a choice I'm making and I'm making it for these reasons and they're all really, really good. And what else would you advise people when they're working to meet the moment they're in as a leader or in their leadership journey?
I think preparation is something I've learned from again, my high school football coaches were the most prepared people I've ever met up to that point. So I think they're always prepared for the moment. I think consistency helps you be better prepared for big moments. Consistency of work ethic helps you be better prepared for those moments. And then stacking evidence for yourself so that when the next big moment arises, you have something to draw from that creates confidence for you. And I don't think we get confident there's a great quote, I forget, Alex Hormozy, I forget, I think his name is, and I'm going to butcher it, but I'll paraphrase as best as I can remember. He said, you don't get confident by screaming aphorisms in the mirror looking at yourself. You get confident by stacking evidence for yourself day after day after day that you can do hard things, and then you can draw from that. And to me, I think that's how you meet moments, is that you just consistently show up, you're prepared, you've done the work, you've created evidence for yourself, which then leads to confidence, which then leads to you probably better meeting the moment. So it's an ongoing process that never, ever ends. The only way to get good at it is to get going. You got to do it. I think we learn who we are in practice, not in theory, as Herminia Ibarra once said. And to me, like that's what it's all about. If somebody's struggling, I'm like, get going, man. I spoke with a kid who's graduating college in 2 weeks, 2 nights ago. I'm like, you got to get going. Like you can't just be waiting around sending resumes. Like get a job or find a person to work for or do something. You can always change. You can always alter. But go into it with one, a great work ethic, and two, just trying to learn as much as possible, knowing that you're young, you have the opportunity to change jobs or even professions or anything, but get going first. And then that's how you really truly learn.
Yeah. It comes from experience, right? One of the things you said is like doing hard things over and over.
Do it.
And not always succeeding. Yeah, it's that just do it. If we could just bottle that, Ryan, like let me know. Sometimes people don't want to take a drink.
Well, all this stuff's much easier said than done, right? So
Yeah,
that's
of course,
why, again, that kind of leads back. That's why we gotta go. Like we gotta take action on. Like whatever the thing is. A guy yesterday, hey, I want to get up and give speeches like you've done. What do you do? I'm like, well, then get on stages. However you got to get on stages, that's what you got to do, man. So do it for free, pay to be on stage, whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
Get on a stage or even create your own stage. But the best way to get good at it is to do it.
Yeah.
And that's usually the case for just about
everything. Yeah, and sometimes your first is the worst. Like, just realize that.
Usually, and you got to be willing to be okay with that, right?
Yeah,
you got to be willing to be okay with being a beginner and not being good. I mean, rarely are you going to be good at anything you try for the first time.
Yeah.
I just played pickleball for the first time. Like, I can kind of figure it out because from playing tennis and ping pong, I kind of get it, but like I'm not that good yet. But It's okay. Like I'll take a few beatings here and there in order to try to get good because it seems like a pretty fun thing to do. So
Yeah.
it's just like that. Like it's okay. I'll be embarrassed by people who are not as athletic as me initially because I don't know what I'm doing yet. But eventually, I'll keep going. I'll probably be okay. So I just think whatever the thing is, you just got to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for being on the Bold Lounge. It's been a delight to have you. All information about Ryan, his books, his podcast, please do listen to The Learning Leader are below in the episode notes. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Bold Lounge podcast. Through the continuum of bold stories, vulnerability to taking a leap, you will meet more extraordinary people making a positive impact for others through their unique and important stories. By highlighting these stories, we hope to inspire others and share the journey of those with a bold mindset. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast and look forward to sharing the next bold journey with you.